My name is Ileana, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm going to be talking to you about how to move through the doshas during quarantine. So, as you know, this time in quarantine, if nothing else, it's really giving us an opportunity to slow down, get off the speed train, and just really take a raw look at our life, right? There's like this before and after. And it's also been a very emotionally charged time. You have probably been through a wide range of emotions from the time, from the very beginning, the first few days till now, almost 2 months after. And in this spectrum of emotions, you have most likely observed some things that are new to you, right? So perhaps you're not a naturally fearful person, and yet you have seen yourself in this place fear during the quarantine. Um, but really understand that all of these emotions are always there, right? So we they're always in this spectrum, and we are constantly moving in and out of them. What happens is that we're usually too distracted, or we're in too much of a hurry to really notice these emotions, right? Or another thing that tends to happen is we like kind of brush them under the rug, right? Because we're constantly being told, oh, you shouldn't feel this way, this or that. So understand that all of these emotions, whatever it is that you're feeling, are completely natural, and you should really allow yourself to move through them, because they are an important part of being a part of this earthly plane, number one. And number two, they're just all part of this spectrum of feelings, emotions, and qualities that we were by nature. All of these emotions are rooted in the doshas. So understanding this root, right? So understanding these underlying doshas can really help us understand where these emotions are coming from and how to move past them. So the idea is not to, get stuck in an emotion, and the idea is not to ignore an emotion. An idea is to acknowledge them and just let ourselves move through them naturally, because we were designed for this. Like this is literally what we've been trained for. So we'll just go through the doshas, and I'll give you some practices that you can implement during the quarantine that will help you, bring some relief to some of these things that you're experiencing. But again, the most important thing to remember is to be very kind to yourself, be very compassionate, because this is part of this experience, right? This experience of quarantine. So we'll start with Vata dosha. And Vata dosha, as we know, is made up primarily of the air and space elements. So of course, this gives its primary function of movement. Vata predominant people tend to be extremely imaginative and creative. They are the ones who are always in their head, and they're the ones who are always like dreaming up really, really amazing new ideas and new projects. Um, they also tend to be, quite social and spiritually, they're also um, very they're very curious. They're very spiritually curious. They like to explore the aspect of themselves. They do really well with rituals and other things that really express their desire to tap into their spirituality. Again, the vata mind is there's a lot of movement there, and this means that our that ideas and thoughts are constantly moving in and out, right? And this can be a really beautiful thing if you use this creative power to actually do creative things. Because on the other side of that, so the flip side of this creativity and this imagination is that there's also a lot of anxiety, right? Because our mind has so many things moving around that it becomes overwhelming. So the other end of that spectrum is to feel anxiety, to feel really spacey, because they lack the focus to put these ideas, to organize them mentally. And this can lead to things like insomnia, which is a huge issue for vatas, or even forgetfulness, right? So we have like all these great ideas, but then we also forget them because we have a very short memory. So um, something that I usually recommend to the vata predominant minds is to, of course, to use their creativity. You know, take up something in which you can express this creativity. Maybe it's art, or painting, and any form of art that calls to you. Or a really good practice is journaling, because it allows you to write down these ideas, hopefully not forget them the next day, and you can just kind of expand on these ideas as you go. But the most important thing for vata, especially now during quarantine, is to keep a very calming, regular routine. So this means that you want to focus on getting up at the same time every day, having your meals at the same time every day, going to bed at the same time every day, and getting the same amount of sleep every day. So again, because one of the other side, the flip side of the balance column for vata is a lot of spaciness. They also tend to not have very restful sleep throughout the night. So this is actually an issue. And the more uh, steady your routine is during the day, the more you will be able to get more regular sleep on a more regular basis. Daily self massage is a great practice. The application of warm oil to the body, in and of itself, is an extremely calming and soothing practice. But of course, also Vata's activated vata tends to have drier skin, drier hair. So the daily oil can really help to promote less dryness, a little bit more of the unctuousness. Meditation, of course, we all know the benefits that it can have on just bringing that sense of stillness and grounding to our mind. So it is especially useful for vata dosha. Um, and a big challenge for them is to make time for rest throughout the day, because believe it or not, even during quarantine, they still tend to over plan themselves, right? Um, in a normal situation, Vata is the one that has 100 things on their schedule, and because they somehow think that they'll have time for everything, and then they end up just running, and of course they get anxious and overwhelmed, because it gets to a point where they realize that they can't do all of those things. And believe it or not, in quarantine, they're pretty much in the same pattern, because they're overscheduling themselves, they overschedule their kids. um, you know if you have like if you're working, then of course you have to do that, but then you tend to overschedule yourself with all the wonderful online offerings that we have, classes and things like that. So you're for this type of energy, give yourself time to rest, and really, like, give yourself permission to rest. You need that throughout the day. So schedule some short 10 to 15-minute breaks throughout your day as part of your routine, because mentally, you will need this time, and preferably use this time not being on the internet or things like that. Preferably just maybe just sit calmly and do some journaling again, which is such a great activity for Vata nature. Listening to soothing music is good, and do gentle movement. Look for the gentle yoga practices, yin yoga, restorative, maybe even a nidra. A nidra practice would be good at night because, again, the challenge of getting to sleep and the challenge of staying asleep is very, it's a very big challenge for Vata. So anything that you can do to promote sound sleep consistently is going to make a huge difference in how you feel emotionally throughout the day. Also look for things like Tai Chi, some slow walks outside. Now that the weather is getting better, it's nice to take some leisurely walks outside. So really avoid the strenuous workouts. Really avoid the intensity of workouts such as too much running, too much cardio, things like that. You need some more restful, relaxing types of movements. Um, your food should be warm and nourishing. So, especially at breakfast. So, Vatas tend to either skip meals because they forget, they're too busy, and they're so overwhelmed with their overscheduled agenda that they forget to make time for eating. So they are eating, on the run. You've seen people like this in traffic. There's somebody's eating. They're like literally having lunch at the traffic signal. That's because they forgot to make themselves time for having a meal. Or they just simply they don't get hungry. This has a lot to do with the fact that they're not consistent with their routines, so their appetite also is irregular and inconsistent. So it's important that you carve out the time, especially at breakfast. Start with warm, nourishing food. So avoid the cold cereal, the dry cereal with the cold milk, things like that. Maybe have a cooked oatmeal, something a little bit more nourishing and substantial than the quick, the protein. Certainly, Vatas should avoid the juicing, should avoid the smoothies, and favor just more actual meals. The caffeine intake also should be limited, maybe not more than 2 a day. The Vatas are very attracted to that initial caffeine high that they get, but then of course what happens is that they crash, and Vatas already they suffer from low energy a lot, and so that's why they think that they need the caffeine boost, but this is not an actual energy boost. You should look for your energy more from your food sources. So really limit the intake of caffeine because that also is going to raise your anxiety level and aggravate Vata even further. And the same goes for fasting. So if you're following the Ayurvedic routine, the schedule, there is a built-in 12-hour overnight fast, and that should be plenty for most people, especially for Vata predominant people. If you do too much fasting, it will bring your edge to the point where your nervous system will kick in, and again that anxiety and that you'll feel lightheaded and spacey, and these are already qualities of aggravated Vata, so you really don't want to go there. You want to stay more to the on the left side column where your this energy is more creative and less anxious. So extended fasting is not recommended for Vata. And there are lots of nice herbs that can help bring some balance and calm vata. A lot of them you can find in your kitchen already, like ginger, cardamom, cumin, cinnamon. Usually things that are very heating, but there is one very specific Ayurvedic herb called ashwagandha, which is it's an adaptogen, but it's specifically used for vata disorders like anxiety, insomnia, and things like that. So if you feel like you are more towards the right hand column, this may be a good herb for you to try. And always please check with a practitioner before you start taking any herbs on a regular basis. So moving on to Pitta dosha. Of course, we know that Pitta is made up primarily of the fire element. So its primary quality, of course, is going to be heat, and it is responsible for the transformation that happens in our body. So the Pitta energy it's characterized mainly for its focus, right? So the Pitta predominant people are very, very focused. They're very organized and driven. They are like what in the West we would call type A's. They are very, very confident of themselves, and they have like they're a great complement to Vata dosha because again, Vata will come up with all of these ideas, right? It's really, really creative, but then they don't have the focus to implement them and to carry them out. So that's where the Pitta energy is really good because they'll take all of these ideas and they'll say, okay, A, B, and C, this is how it has to happen. And they go, 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 right? They like push themselves. And that's really great. But what happens is the flip side of that is that if things don't get done that way, then they become angry, they become frustrated, and these emotions maybe even can turn into aggression, right? And we kind of like we went from being very driven and focused, and now we're angry and aggressive. So again, all of these emotions are valid, right? They all have a place, and sometimes they're very necessary. Like anger can be appropriate in some instances, and anger can drive you to action, right? So anger in and of itself is not bad. It's all about having the appropriate emotion at the appropriate time, right? Do you see that? Do you see that difference? So again, be very aware of this emotion. Why is it coming up in this situation, and is it appropriate for me to act this way, or should I move towards the other side where I become more charismatic, and this uh, leads me to be more hardworking, right? So there's legitimacy in all of these emotions. We just have to learn to like move through them and navigate them and use them to our benefit, because the end goal is to make these emotions work for me, to make them so that I am the best version of myself. And the practices, the any practice that you have in your daily routine, in your daily practices, they all can be helpful in steering these emotions and using them for that purpose, for optimizing and for making you your best you. So just really keep that in mind. So for Pitta, the best remedy is to be moderate in everything. Pittas tend to be very intense. They are intense about everything. They're intense about their emotions. They're intense about their relationships. They have intense anger. Like everything about them is really intense. So you want everything to just be like moderate and just soften them, right? Just bring them a little bit of soft to those edges. Daily daily self-massage and daily meditation are also good for pitta. And always remember that even five, two people that are pitta predominant, they will be completely different from each other. So everyone is unique. So these things that I'm telling you are generally considered, good practices for each of those doshas. So for most pittas, daily self-massage and daily meditation can be really helpful. Of course, we want to avoid stress and mental stress and emotional eating. Again, they're very intense, right? They live everything intensely and very passionate because remember, it's that fire. So we want to avoid reacting emotionally, taking it out on our food and not making very good choices. And that goes for unhealthy choices such as alcohol and smoking. So really want to watch what your triggers are. If you feel like, oh, I'm so upset, I can reach for a snack, or I'm going to reach for alcohol. Really look at what that's coming from, and maybe practice some breathing and just take a little breather before you reach to that, because that might not be really the most appropriate thing for you, because what happens is then these feelings will just get exacerbated, and it'll make matters worse, and really again what you want to do is you just kind of want to move through them. So there's still a lot of exercise that you can do even in quarantine that would be really appropriate for pittas. Dancing is really, really good, especially if it's freestyle dancing. Um, Remember, they are like really focused. So you don't, and they like to be the ones in charge. They like to be the ones saying, this is how it should be done. So it's probably not a great idea to tell someone, okay, this is how you have to dance. Like let them, be more free and more expressive of their dancing. They'll do a lot better. And generally any outdoor activity. Now that the weather is not too hot yet, it's still relatively mild. It's good for them to get outside, but any outdoor activity that won't require them to get too much sun exposure is good. Water activities in general, anything where they are having a little bit of vigorous exercise, but not too much. So remember, everything in moderation for pitta. You want the fire there, but you don't want this fire to go boom, because it'll literally blow up, right? So you just want that fire to be moderate enough. If they do get outside, it's good for them to stop and smell the flower, like literally stop and smell the flowers. And rose is a great aroma for them. If you have like rose essential oil, they can wear that as perfume, because they don't pittas won't do well with the intensity of a lot of these synthetic perfumes. So they need something more like a rose, or like a gardenia, or some very, very pleasant smelling flower that's not overpowering. So that keeps them more balanced. Pittas are very organized. They are incredibly, they need everything to be, remember, they're the type A's, right? They need everything to be very well organized. And I know that a lot of the pittas in quarantine, they've already rearranged their bedroom closets. They've already rearranged their kids' rooms, and they're probably currently working on the kitchen cabinet. This is their favorite activity because they like everything to be absolutely in order. So this is a really good time for pittas to do some home simplification and some downsizing. Your foods should be cooling, but especially energizing. So the pittas, as I mentioned, pittas also have very intense appetite, and the pittas should not wait until they get extremely hungry, because then this anger comes out. So they need to make sure that they know when, more or less, when they're going to get hungry, so that they can have their food ready. So in quarantine, it's probably a great time for you to practice some meal planning. It's good for you to try some new recipes. Um, your foods should also be hearty and nourishing. And fasting is also not a great thing for pittas, because again, they're the ones who get hangry. So you really don't want to push them to that extreme. They could, beside the 12-hour overnight fasting, maybe they could do like a little bit more, like 1 or 2 hours max, but really not more than that. And really be careful. But in general, for anyone, just try to have whole foods mostly. Just avoid the overly processed kinds of foods, and you should be fine. And a great herb for pitta is shatavari. It is generally a considered a female tonic. I mean, it can be used for men as well, but traditionally it's used as a female tonic, especially if you're going through a transition period. So it's good for um, pitta pitta predominant transitions, like hot flashes and mood, anger as your predominant mood and things like that. If I didn't mention it before, for vata, also triphala is a great formula to have if it's tridoshic. So wherever you are on the dosha spectrum, it's a really good herb to take daily. It is, well, it has a lot of different uses, but traditionally we use it as a way to regulate the digestion, and also to very gently scrape toxins from the digestive tract. So it's a really good gentle herb that you can have. So I would definitely add triphala to all of the doshas. And kapha is predominantly earth and water. So of course, there is a lot of stability in kapha, right? Think of something that's very, very grounded and very stable. That is kapha. So of course, this means that, well, if you have any kapha friends, really reach out to them now, because they are totally missing the physical hugs. Kathas are extremely nurturing people. They are like the fichi, the touchy feely kind of people who are constantly, hugging you, and they really crave that physical closeness. So make sure that you reach out to your kapha friends and send them some virtual hugs, because this is definitely something that they're missing now during quarantine. They're usually extremely, extremely grounded, down to earth, and this, of course, makes them very loyal friends. But of course, the flip side of that is that it's very easy, especially now during the quarantine, to just get into like a rut, right? Like I don't want to get out of bed. I just want to stay and watch Netflix all day, and I want to snack on all my favorite foods, and I'm going to sleep in, and all of these kapha increasing things that may lead you to just feeling depressed. You will feel really heavy and lethargic a lot of the time. So the number one remedy for kapha is stimulation and movement. You really, really want to find ways during your day where you can be very active. If you can and you're able, you kaphas should be doing the more vigorous exercise. They can really benefit from a lot of um, you know vigorous activity. So just in general, avoid, even though this is really what your heart desires, avoid staying on the sofa all day, avoid staying in bed all day, and really especially avoid taking naps and sleeping during the day. Kaphas also tend to get congested. They'll get some congestion in the chest. They'll get some congestion in sinus. It is allergy season, so Nasya drops are a good daily habit. They are these oil drops that you put into each nostril once a day. I can send a link to those if you'd like. They're very, very gentle and they're very nice, and they can really help to prevent a lot of the congestion that kapha has a tendency to. Again, as I said before, just seek out variety. Put on the music, start dancing in your living room. Just really look for ways not only to move your body, but just to express yourself freely and be a little bit more spontaneous. Spontaneity is a good way to counteract these kapha qualities that are more heavy and lethargic. As I said before, avoid daytime sleeping, and kaphas should wake up really on the earlier side. So any time between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. is a great time for kaphas, because it's the end of the vata time of the morning, when there's a lot more prana in the atmosphere. So you need this literal surge of energy in the morning. So waking up very early is a really good way to have more natural energy throughout the day, especially for kaphas. Some great exercise options are any cardio. Zumba is my personal favorite. If you're lucky to have a Peloton at home, do that. If you go out in nature, do some speed walking, anything that can get your heart rate up is very good for kapha dosha. The oil massage is not as important for kaphas. They can do it less. They don't have to do it every day. They can do it 2 or 3 times a week, because their skin usually is naturally on the oily side. But some really good practices for kapha are either exfoliating or using the dry brush. And just challenge yourself, make yourself learn something new. There's so many great offerings online now. Zoom is like this has really revolutionized our quarantine experience. And there's so many things to do, even for free. But you can even try like a puzzle, or learn a language, or something that really keeps your mind active, because physical activity is important, but so is mental activity, because again, kapha has this tendency of just getting to be very, very dull and heavy and foggy. So you need some mental, things that will keep you mentally active as well. Food should have less quantity, and this is really challenging now during the quarantine, because we're at home all day and we have access to all the snacks we want. and because maybe we're also feeling depressed and sorry for ourselves, we're also going to crave more of like the comfort foods. So be careful with that. Try to limit your food intake. Kaphas really should not be snacking in between meals, and just make sure that your food isn't very on the too much on the rich side. Whereas vatas can do a lot more of the healthy fats, which I think I didn't mention with the vata slide, but vatas should be doing more of the healthy fats like avocado oil, coconut oil, and ghee is a great one for vata. Kaphas really should limit their intake of the healthy fats. They still need a little bit, but not overdoing it. And finally, a really good herb for kapha is called trikatu. It's a nice formula that has a lot of heating qualities to it. So it's very good for just generally activating the kapha digestive fire and bringing some heat, because kapha does tend to run cold. So as you've seen, we move through the doshas during this quarantine. It's actually a really interesting experience. But like I said, just allow yourself to feel whatever it is that you need to feel, but know that you will get to the other side. This is think of a spectrum, the spectrum of emotions, and we're constantly moving from one to the other, from one to the other. And this movement of emotions you should just allow yourself to flow, and you should allow yourself to observe everything. And this is part of the experience. The quarantine really has given us this special time to pause and really pay attention to these things that we normally wouldn't really be aware of. So use that time as a way to understand yourself better, right? So just try to take it one day at a time. And I hope that this has been helpful for you. And thank you so much for being here with me. And I hope to see you soon. Namaste.